When I gathered all those torn pages scattered on my living room floor, I realized my husband had left me a confession that had been hidden for 15 years. And the truth was darker than I could ever have imagined. My name is Mary Helen. I'm 82 years old, and today I'm going to tell you a story I've kept in my heart for a very long time. A story that still makes my hands tremble when I remember it. But before I begin, I'd like to ask a little favor. If you could leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories, I'd be grateful from the bottom of my heart. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's on the other side of the screen listening to me. Well, let's go. I met Robert in 1963 at a church social that happened every Saturday night at the town square. I was 19 years old, still living with my parents and working as a seamstress at Mr. Anderson's tailor shop on Main Street. Robert was 28. He was a handsome man, tall, with deep brown eyes, the kind that when they looked at you, it seemed like they could read your soul. He worked as an accountant at a small office downtown. A serious, educated man who always wore a suit and tie, even in the scorching heat we had back then. I remember it like it was yesterday. He asked me to dance a waltz. I was wearing a light blue dress that I had sewn myself with a thin belt at the waist. My mother had styled my hair in those rollers that were used back then, you know? And when he held my hand to dance, I felt a shiver run up my spine. We danced all night long. He was quiet, but when he spoke, he said beautiful things. He asked me to get ice cream at Johnson's ice cream parlor the following week. And that's how our courtship began. Robert was a man of few words, but grand gestures. He brought me flowers he picked on the way from work. He waited for me at the tailor shop door every day at 6 in the evening to walk me home. My father liked him. He said he was a good man, hard-working, who would take care of his daughter with dignity. And my mother got all giddy when he came for dinner at our house on Sundays because he always complimented her cooking. We dated for a year and a half. In April 1964, he proposed to me. It was on a Sunday afternoon, by the river, where we used to go for walks. He took a little box from his coat pocket and showed me a simple gold ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I cried, accepted right away, and 3 months later, in July 1964, we got married at St. Joseph's Church, with Father Augustus officiating the ceremony. It was a small wedding, just family and close friends. My dress was white lace that I made myself. It took me 2 months sewing every detail, and Robert looked handsome in a black suit with a gray tie I gave him as a gift. We moved into a little rented house on Flower Street, number 23. It was a simple house, 3 rooms, a little bedroom, a small living room that opened into the kitchen, and a tiny bathroom in the back, but it was ours. I decorated everything with great care. Little chintz curtains I made on the sewing machine, crocheted doilies my mother gave me, and some little paintings with landscapes we bought at the market. Robert set up a small wooden bookshelf in the living room for his books. He loved to read. Every month he bought 1 or 2 new books at Mr. Miller's bookstore, and spent the evenings after dinner reading in the old armchair we received as a wedding gift. And it was there, on those silent nights, that I began to notice his habit. The first time I saw it was about 3 months after the wedding. It must have been October 1964, because I remember it was hot, and I had left the living room window open to let in a breeze. I was in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes when I heard a strange little noise coming from the living room. That sound of paper being torn, you know? Slowly, carefully. I dried my hands on my apron and went to see what it was. Robert was sitting in the armchair with a book on his lap. It was a book of short stories, I think by Edgar Allan Poe, with a dark green cover. And he was tearing out a page. It wasn't just any page, it was specifically page 47. He tore it out so carefully, as if it were a ritual, and then folded the page and put it in his pants pocket. I stood there at the kitchen door, not understanding anything. I thought maybe it's some story he really liked and wants to keep to read again. I didn't pay much attention. I went back to the kitchen and finished washing the dishes. But then it happened again. A few weeks later, in November, the same thing. He finished reading another book, a poetry one this time, and tore out page 47. He put it in his pocket and continued as if nothing had happened. This time I was curious, but I didn't ask. You know how it is? We were newlyweds. I thought maybe it was some silly habit of his, a superstition, I don't know. Back then, women didn't question everything their husbands did, you understand? We were raised to respect, not to stick our noses where they weren't invited. And so it went, month after month, year after year. Every time Robert finished a book, he tore out page 47 and kept it. I saw it, but I didn't say anything. Sometimes I was intrigued, thinking why always page 47? What's special about that page? But I never had the courage to ask. He was such a reserved man, so closed off with his feelings, that I was afraid to invade that space of his. I was afraid he'd think I was being nosy. Over time, it became part of our routine. I already expected it. When I saw he was getting close to the end of a book, I already knew. Soon he'll tear out page 47. And that's exactly what happened. Like clockwork, always the same page, always the same care when tearing it out, always kept in his pants or coat pocket. I tried to touch on the subject subtly sometimes. Once in 1967, I commented, "Robert, you read so much. You must have a bunch of pages saved somewhere, right?" He just smiled from the corner of his mouth and said, "Yeah, I have a few," and didn't say anything else. He changed the subject, asked if I wanted to go to the movies on Saturday, and I let it go. Life went on. We were happy as much as possible. Robert continued working at the office. I continued sewing at home to earn some extra money. We didn't have children. We tried for years, but it never happened. I guess it was God's will, as my mother used to say. But I confess it made me sad. I saw everyone with big bellies, with babies in their arms, and there I was, empty. Robert never complained, never demanded anything from me. He said, "Mary, we have each other. That's already more than many people have in life." And I believed him, but there was something in him, a shadow, something he carried that he never completely shared with me. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window, lost in thought. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd just say, "Yes, love, go back to sleep." But I knew it wasn't. I felt it. And those pages kept being torn out. Page 47. Always page 47. In 1970, we moved to a slightly bigger house on St. Peter Street, number 15. 3 bedrooms, a more spacious living room, a little backyard where I planted some rose bushes. Robert set up a small office in one of the extra bedrooms where he kept all his books. The shelf was already full, dozens and dozens of books, and I knew that in each of those books, page 47 was missing. Once in 1972, I was cleaning the closet and found a shoebox at the top of his wardrobe. It was an old men's shoebox, the brand he wore. I was curious, shook the box, and heard the sound of paper inside, a lot of paper. My heart raced. I thought the pages, they're all here. But I didn't open it. I swear to you I didn't open it. I was afraid. Afraid of what? I can't explain, but I was. I put the box back in place and never touched the subject again. The years went by, 1973, 1974, 1975. Life went on its course. Robert kept reading, kept tearing out the pages, kept saving them, and I kept quiet. Sometimes, when he left for work, I'd go to his office and look at all those books on the shelf. I'd pick one up, open to page 47, and it wasn't there. Just a little hole where it had been torn out, an emptiness in the middle of the book. And I'd close the book and put it back, feeling a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. There was a time in 1976 when he became quieter than normal, more distant. He spent more time at the office after work. He'd come home late, tired, with deep dark circles under his eyes. I'd ask if everything was okay at work, if there was a problem, and he'd just say no, "Everything's fine, Mary, just a lot of work." But I knew it wasn't just that. One night in December 1976, he was particularly downcast. We had dinner in silence. He barely touched his food. After dinner, he went to the office and stayed there late. I went to bed alone, as had happened on several nights that year. But this time I woke up in the middle of the night, around 3 in the morning, and realized he hadn't come to bed. I got up, put on my robe, and went to the office. The door was ajar. I looked through the crack and saw him sitting in the chair, his head in his hands, holding one of the pages, 47. He was crying silently, but he was crying. Tears were running down his face, dripping onto the page he was holding. My heart broke at that moment. I wanted to go in, hug him, ask what was happening, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed there, just watching. After a few minutes, he wiped his face with the back of his hand, put the page in a drawer, and turned off the office light. I ran back to the bedroom before he saw me awake. That image never left my head. Him crying alone in the middle of the night, holding that page as if it were the most important thing in the world. I knew there was a secret, a big secret, something he was carrying alone and that was consuming him from the inside. But I continued without asking, out of fear, out of respect, or maybe out of cowardice. I don't know. And then came 1979, January 1979, a month that changed my life forever. It was unbearably hot that summer. Robert was quieter than ever. He had turned 44 in December 1978, and I was 35. We had been married for 15 years, 15 years of marriage, 15 years of that strange habit, 15 years of torn pages. On January 23, 1979, a Tuesday, Robert left for work as always, kissed my forehead, said, "See you later, love," and he left. It was 7 in the morning. I stayed home sewing a skirt for Mrs. Lawrence, an old client. The day passed slowly, as always. I prepared lunch, ate alone, continued sewing in the afternoon. When it was 5:30, I was already waiting for him to arrive for dinner, but he didn't come. 6 o'clock, nothing. 6:30, nothing. 7 o'clock, and I was already worried. Robert was punctual, always arrived between 6 and 6:30. 7:30 at night, there was a knock on my door. It was Mr. Carter, his work colleague. Mr. Carter's face was white, his eyes red. My heart froze right then. "Mrs. Mary, something happened." "Robert, he felt sick at the office this afternoon." We called the ambulance, but there wasn't time. It was his heart, Mrs. Mary. It was very quick. He didn't suffer. The world collapsed at that moment. I collapsed. I fell to my knees right there at my front door, unable to breathe, unable to understand. Robert dead, it wasn't possible. He was 44 years old. He was strong, he was healthy. What do you mean, his heart? The wake was the next day, the burial on the 25th. I was in shock. I couldn't cry. I couldn't feel. It was like I was floating, seeing everything from the outside. My parents were there, my siblings, his friends, his work colleagues, everyone giving me their condolences, hugging me, saying they were sorry. But I wasn't there. I was empty. After the burial, I returned home alone. I entered that house that had been ours for years and was now just mine. The silence was deafening. I went to the bedroom, lay down on the bed, and only then did the tears come. I cried until I had no more tears. I cried until my whole body hurt. I spent days like that, not eating right, not sleeping right. The house was full of his things, the clothes in the closet, the shoes lined up, the toothbrush in the bathroom, and in the office, all those books, those damn books. It was a week after the burial, in early February 1979, that I decided to organize his things. I needed to do something to occupy my mind, to not go crazy with sadness and loneliness. I started with the closet. I separated the clothes I was going to donate, the ones I was going to keep as a memory. And then I looked at the top of the wardrobe and saw that shoebox, the box I had seen years ago and had never opened. My hand trembled when I picked it up. It was heavy, very heavy. I sat on the bed and put the box on my lap. I took a deep breath and opened it. And inside were them. Hundreds of them. Hundreds of pages, 47. All carefully folded, organized, saved. Pages and pages and pages. 15 years of torn pages, all there in that box. My hands were shaking. I picked up one of the pages and unfolded it, and that's when I saw it. On the back of the page, in Robert's handwriting, small and shaky, was written Anna Claire. I stared at that name, not understanding. Anna Claire. Who was Anna Claire? I had never heard Robert mention that name. In 15 years of marriage, never, not once. My heart started beating faster. I picked up another page from the box, unfolded it, turned it over, and there it was again, written Acacia Street. I picked up another. 47. Just the number 47, large, circled several times with a pen. Another page, 1962. Another, I saw. My breathing was accelerated, my hands sweating cold. I started picking up the pages faster, one after another, reading what was written on each one. Some had just one word, others had short phrases, some had dates. I poured all the pages onto the bed. Hundreds of them spread across the mattress, falling on the floor, and me there in the middle of that sea of paper, trying to understand what it all meant. It wasn't suicide. That phrase made me freeze. It was written on a page from 1968. I could see by the date he had noted in the corner. I picked it up with both hands and read it again. It wasn't suicide. What wasn't suicide? Who? Anna Claire. I got up from the bed and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. My legs were wobbly. I drank all the water in one gulp. I took several deep breaths and went back to the bedroom. I needed to organize this. I needed to understand. I sat on the floor, leaning against the bed, and started separating the pages by date. Robert had written the date on almost all of them, in the lower corner. Some were from 1964, right after we got married. Others from 1965, 1966, following year by year until 1978, a few months before he died. I started with the oldest. The first page he had torn out and written something on must have been from August 1964, 3 months after our wedding. On the back was written only, "I can't forget." Nothing more. Just that. The next one from September 1964. Anna Claire, forgive me. Another from October. I should have done something. November, Acacia Street, 47. Each page was like a piece of a conversation he was having with himself, or with this Anna Claire. A conversation that lasted 15 years, hidden in book pages, kept in a shoebox at the top of the closet. A conversation I never knew existed. I stayed up all night, sitting on the floor of that bedroom, reading and rereading each page, trying to piece the story together in my head. The sun was rising when I finally managed to put together the main pieces. And what I discovered left my heart broken in a way that not even his death had managed to do. Anna Claire had been Robert's fiancée before me. In 1962, they were going to get married. She died a week before the wedding, in the house where they were going to live together. Acacia Street, number 47. The death was registered as suicide, but Robert never believed that. He thought it had been something else, something he saw, but never had the courage to tell anyone. I sat there on the floor with all those pages scattered around me and cried. I cried for Anna Claire, whom I never met. I cried for Robert, who carried this weight alone all those years. And I cried for myself, for the wife who lived 15 years next to a man who could never completely free himself from the past. The tears fell on my lap, wet the pages I was holding. I felt betrayed, but at the same time, I felt immense pity. How hard it must have been for him to marry me, carrying that pain, that guilt, that secret. All those nights I woke up, and he was looking out the window, he was thinking of her. All those times I saw him sad, distant, it was because of her. But there was more. It wasn't just mourning. It wasn't just longing. There was something darker in this story. In the more recent pages from 1977 and 1978, the messages became increasingly desperate, more confused, more frightening. I know who it was. I'm afraid to speak. If I tell, they'll kill me too. The mansion is still standing. The answers are there. My God in heaven, what had happened in that house? Who had killed Anna Claire? And why was Robert so afraid? Who was he afraid of? I spent Saturday, February 3rd, 1979, organizing all the pages better. I put them in chronological order on the living room table. It was like putting together a giant puzzle, but instead of an image, it was a story, a terrible story. I made notes in a notebook. I connected the information, creating a timeline. Robert had met Anna Claire in 1960. She was 19 years old, he was 25. They fell in love, got engaged in 1961. They bought an old house on Acacia Street, number 47, to renovate and live in after the wedding. The wedding was scheduled for September 15th, 1962. On September 8th, 1962, a week before, Anna Claire was found dead inside that house, hanged from a ceiling beam. The police investigated, concluded it was suicide, closed the case. Robert was destroyed. He spent 2 years alone, in deep depression, unable to move on with life, until he met me in 1963 and gradually tried to rebuild. But he never believed the suicide version, and from his notes, he had a reason for that. On a page from 1966, he wrote, "I arrived there early that day, saw a car leaving, a black car. I didn't tell the police because I was afraid. I still am." Another page from 1970. He was too important. No one would believe me. They'd say I was crazy with grief. And the most frightening one from 1976. He saw me at the funeral. He looked at me like a warning. I understood the message. Silence or death. My God. Robert had seen someone leaving the house the day Anna Claire died. Someone important, someone powerful, someone who made him afraid to speak the truth for 16 years. And this someone had threatened him in some way at Anna Claire's own funeral. I got up from the table and went to the living room window. I looked at the empty street outside. It was noon on a hot Saturday in February. The neighbors' houses were quiet. People must have been having lunch, taking naps. Everything seemed so normal, so peaceful. But inside my house, I was discovering that my husband had kept a secret that could have cost him his life, and maybe it did. Could his heart attack really have been natural, or not? I couldn't think like that. I was getting paranoid. I went back to the table and continued reading the pages. There was one from 1973 that said, "I need to go back there, I need to look, but I can't. Every time I pass near that street, my body freezes." Another from 1975. "The house has been abandoned for years. Nobody wants to live there. They say it's haunted. I know it's not ghosts, it's guilt. It's innocent blood crying out for justice." And then I found the page that changed everything. It was one of the last from November 1978, 2 months before he died. On it, Robert had written more than on the others. The handwriting was shaky, hurried, as if he had written it with urgency, with desperation. "Mary, if you're reading this, it's because I'm already dead. Forgive the cowardice of not having told you while I was alive. I didn't have the strength, but I need you to know the truth. Anna Claire didn't kill herself. I saw who was there. I saw the car leaving in a hurry. When I entered the house, I found her. She was still warm. It had just happened. But I was afraid. He was the mayor of the city. No one would believe me. They'd say I was lying to clear myself of some suspicion. So I kept quiet, and that silence killed me inside all these days. The truth is in the house, in the basement. I never had the courage to go down there, but I know that's where the proof is. Mary, don't go alone. It's dangerous. But if you go, know that I loved you. You were my light after the darkness. Don't let my cowardice tarnish the memory of our love." Robert. The tears ran down my face as I read that letter. It wasn't even a letter. It was a piece of paper torn from a book with a confession he never had the courage to make in life. He knew. He always knew, and carried it alone, with fear, with guilt, until the day he died. The mayor of the city in 1962. I tried to remember who it was. I was 18 years old at that time, didn't pay much attention to politics, but my father did. My father always talked about politics in Sunday conversations. I closed my eyes and tried to search my memory for who the mayor was in 1962. And then I remembered. Colonel Augustus Mitchell, a rich, powerful man, landowner, respected by everyone. He had been mayor from 1961 to 1965. After that, he became a state representative. He died in 1973 in a car accident. I remembered because it was a scandal. Everyone in town talked about it. Robert was talking about him. Colonel Augustus Mitchell had something to do with Anna Claire's death. But what? Why? What was the connection between them? I went to Robert's office and started looking through his books, in the drawers, anywhere that might have more information. I went through everything, and in a locked drawer of the desk, which I managed to open with a hairpin, I found a yellowed envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings. The first clipping was from September 10th, 1962. The headline read, "Young Bride Found Dead on Eve of Wedding." The article said that Ana Claire Rodriguez, 21 years old, had been found lifeless in the house on Acacia Street, number 47, where she would live after her marriage to Robert Silva. The police investigated and concluded it was suicide by hanging. The family was distraught. The groom, in shock, did not want to give an interview. Burial would be the next day at the municipal cemetery. The second clipping was from a week later, September 17th, 1962. Family requests new investigation in young woman's death. The article said that Anna Claire's family did not accept the suicide version and asked the police to reopen the investigations. They claimed that Anna Claire was happy, excited about the wedding, had no reason to take her own life. But the police maintained the initial conclusion. Case closed. And the third clipping, this one made me stop breathing. It was from September 20th, 1962. Mayor Augustus Mitchell denies any involvement with investigation. The article was small, but it said that rumors in the city suggested that the mayor had pressured the police to close the case quickly. The mayor vehemently denied it, said they were defamations by political opponents, that he didn't even know the victim personally. Lawsuits for slander would be filed against whoever spread such lies. So it was true. There was political pressure on the case. The mayor had ordered the investigation closed. Why? What did he have to hide? What was his connection to Anna Claire? I spent all Sunday researching, thinking, trying to put the puzzle together. I called my sister Teresa, who was older than me, and remembered things from that time better. I asked if she remembered the case of Ana Claire Rodriguez in 1962. "I remember, yes," she said. "It was such a sadness. The whole family was devastated. Her mother, Mrs. Constance, said until the end of her life that her daughter hadn't killed herself, but no one listened. The police filed the case, and that was it." "Why are you asking about this, Mary?" "I didn't tell her. I said it was just curiosity, that I had remembered the case for some reason." I hung up the phone and kept thinking. Anna Claire's mother. Could she still be alive? If she was, how old would she be now? Anna Claire died at 21 in 1962. If her mother was, let's say, 45 years old at that time, now in 1979 she would be 62 years old. It was possible she was still alive. On Monday, February 5th, I went to the county clerk's office. I asked to check death records. I wanted to know if Mrs. Constance Rodriguez was still alive. The clerk helped me search, and we discovered that yes, she was alive, living in a little house on the outskirts of town, in Riverside neighborhood. My heart raced. I needed to talk to her. I needed to know what she knew. But how to approach and talk about her dead daughter from 17 years ago? How to explain why I was interested in this? I spent Tuesday thinking, planning what I was going to say. On Wednesday, February 7th, I gathered courage. I took a bus to Riverside. It was far, almost an hour trip. I got off at the neighborhood's main square and asked an old man where Mrs. Constance Rodriguez's house was. He pointed to a narrow little street, third house on the left, the yellowish one with a wooden fence. "But Mrs. Constance doesn't receive many visitors, no. She's kind of reclusive, poor thing. Never recovered from her daughter's death, they say." I thanked him and walked there. The house was simple, small, with peeling paint. I knocked on the door. It took a while, but she answered. She was a short, thin lady, all white hair tied in a bun, deep, tired eyes, but they still shone with some life. "Good afternoon. Are you Mrs. Constance?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I am." "What do you want, miss?" "My name is Mary Helen. I need to talk to you about Anna Clare." Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, her hand went to her chest, and for a moment I thought she was going to faint. I held her by the arm. "Easy, Mrs. Constance. I didn't come to do harm. I need to know the truth about what happened to your daughter." She looked at me with a mixture of distrust and hope. After a few seconds that seemed eternal, she opened the door wider and invited me in. The house was dark, smelled of mold and loneliness. There were photos of Anna Clare everywhere, on the wall, on the little living room table, on the sideboard. A pretty girl with long hair and a sweet smile. We sat on the old living room sofa. Mrs. Constance was trembling. I took her hand and told her everything. I told her I was the widow of Robert Silva, Anna Clare's fiancé. I told her about the torn pages, the written messages, his confession. I told her he had seen someone leaving the house the day of the death. And I told her that someone was Colonel Augustus Mitchell. When I finished speaking, Mrs. Constance was crying silently. Tears ran down her wrinkled face, fell on her lap. She squeezed my hand tightly. "I always knew," she whispered. "I always knew my girl hadn't killed herself." She was too happy, was radiant about the wedding, had no reason to do that. But nobody believed me. They said I was in denial, that I didn't want to accept the truth. But I knew. A mother knows. "Do you know why Colonel Augustus Mitchell would have done this?" I asked, afraid of the answer. Mrs. Constance let go of my hand and got up from the sofa. She went to an old cabinet in the corner of the living room and took out a box, a small wooden box full of yellowed papers. She brought it to the coffee table and opened it. Anna Clare worked as a secretary at City Hall in 1962. She was the personal secretary to Augustus Mitchell. One day, about 2 months before she died, she came home scared. She said she had seen some things in his office, documents, proof of embezzlement of public funds, a lot of money. She made copies in secret and kept them. She said she was going to report it after the wedding, when she was safer, protected by her husband. But she never got to make that report. My God. Anna Clare was going to report the mayor for corruption, and he found out and killed her to silence her. "The copies she made, do you still have them?" I asked, almost voicelessly. Mrs. Constance shook her head. No, she kept them in a secret place. She said it was in the house on Acacia Street, in the basement. But after she died, when I went there to look, I didn't find anything. The police had already turned everything upside down. I thought maybe they had taken them, or maybe the murderer found them first. I never knew about those copies again. The basement. Robert had written in the letter that the truth was in the basement. He knew. Somehow he knew that was where Anna Clare had hidden the evidence. I spent another hour talking with Mrs. Constance. She showed me photos of Anna Clare, told me stories about her, cried a lot. When I said goodbye, she hugged me tight and said, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to me. For 17 years, I thought I was going crazy. But now I know I'm not. My daughter was murdered, and I'll die knowing the truth, even if it's too late to do justice." I returned home that afternoon with a heavy heart, but with absolute certainty. I needed to go to that house. I needed to go to Acacia Street, number 47. I needed to go down to that basement and find what Anna Clare had hidden. For both of them. For her and for Robert. For both who died carrying this terrible secret. I spent 2 days mentally preparing myself to go to that house. 2 days looking at the pages spread on the living room table, rereading Robert's letter, thinking about Anna Clare, about everything that had happened 17 years ago. I knew I had to go, but the fear was greater than the courage. On Friday, February 9th, 1979, I woke up determined. I couldn't put it off anymore. I had coffee, put on long pants and a long-sleeved blouse, got an old flashlight from the kitchen cabinet, put it in a bag along with matches, and left the house. It was 9 in the morning. The sun was already strong. The typical February heat was already punishing. I took the bus that went downtown. Acacia Street was in a more distant neighborhood, near where the old municipal slaughterhouse used to be. A place that had been good in the 50s, but was abandoned when City Hall moved the slaughterhouse to another location in the 60s. People gradually left there. Nowadays it was an almost deserted area, with old houses, some occupied by poor families, others completely abandoned. I got off the bus at the corner of John Street and walked about 5 blocks until I reached Acacia Street. The street was empty. There was no one. The houses that still had people were few, and the windows were all closed. The silence was heavy, only broken by the sound of my footsteps on the cracked asphalt and the song of some distant bird. I walked slowly, reading the house numbers. 31, 35, 39, 43, and then I saw it. Number 47. My heart raced. I stopped on the sidewalk in front and just stood there looking. It was an old mansion, 2 stories, with architecture from the 40s. The paint had all peeled off. The walls were gray with dirt and time. The windows had been boarded up with wooden planks. The iron gate was rusty, half fallen. The front yard was overgrown. Weeds grown waist-high, full of garbage people threw there. There was a bad smell coming from there, a mix of sewage, mold, and abandonment. I looked around. No one on the street. I took a deep breath and pushed the gate. It creaked loudly, a sound that cut through the silence and made me freeze for a second. But the gate opened. I entered the yard. The weeds brushed against my legs as I walked to the front door. The door was ajar. Someone had broken the lock a long time ago. You could see it was broken. I pushed the door carefully, and it opened with a long groan from the rusty hinges. A horrible smell came from inside. Smell of mold, rat feces, rotten things. I put my hand to my nose and took a step inside. The living room was dark. What little light came in was from the open door behind me and some cracks between the boards on the windows. I could see the place had been looted. There was no furniture, just debris on the floor, empty beverage bottles, crushed cans, old papers. The walls had graffiti, curse words written with spray paint. In the corner of the room there was an old mattress, dirty, torn. Homeless people must use this place sometimes. I stood there at the entrance, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my head. I thought of Robert stepping on this same floor 17 years ago. I thought of Anna Claire here, dead, hanging from that beam. I looked at the living room ceiling and saw the old wooden beams. Which one would it be? On which one had she been found? I shook my head, trying to push away those thoughts. I hadn't come here to imagine horrors. I had come to look for the basement, to look for the evidence Anna Claire had hidden. I crossed the room carefully, avoiding the garbage on the floor. I passed through a narrow hallway. There was a staircase to the second floor on the right, but that's not where I was going. I continued following the hallway until I reached the kitchen. The kitchen was horrible. The sink was broken. The old stove had been ripped out. Only the marks on the wall remained. The floor was covered with pigeon and rat droppings. I had to step very carefully. And then I saw it. In the corner of the kitchen, half hidden behind some debris, there was a trap door in the floor, an old wooden door, horizontal, with a metal ring to pull. The basement. I approached slowly, took the flashlight from my bag, turned it on, and pointed it at the trap door. There was dust accumulated on top, dirt, but you could see that someone had opened it a long time ago. The marks in the dust were old. I bent down, grabbed the metal ring, and pulled. The trap door was heavy, but I managed to lift it. It opened with a loud creak, and a cloud of dust rose. I had a coughing fit, turned my face away, waited for the dust to settle. When I could breathe again, I pointed the flashlight inside. It was a wooden staircase descending into darkness. The steps looked rotten, weak. You couldn't see the bottom. The flashlight only illuminated the first steps. After that, it was just complete darkness, and an even worse smell rose from there. Smell of wet earth, dead things, a place that hasn't seen sun in decades. I stood there, looking at that black hole, and fear took over me. I couldn't move. What if the stairs broke? What if I fell down there and no one found me? I was alone. Nobody knew I had come here. If something happened to me, I would die here, just like Anna Claire died, alone, in the dark. But then I thought of Robert. I thought of how he had carried this weight alone for so long. I thought of how he never had the courage to go down to this basement, and how it consumed him from the inside until the day he died. And I thought of Anna Claire, a 21-year-old girl who was murdered for wanting to do the right thing, for wanting to report a corrupt man. I took a deep breath, said a Hail Mary quietly, and started to descend. The first step groaned under my foot, but it held. The second, too. I went down slowly, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. The stairs had about 13 steps. With my free hand, I held onto the compacted earth wall beside me, trying to balance. The flashlight in the other hand illuminated the path. When I finally stepped on the basement floor, a shiver ran up my spine. The ceiling was low, I almost touched my head on it. The floor was packed earth, damp. The walls were also earth, with some wooden beams providing support. The place was small, about 10 by 13 feet, and was empty, completely empty. I pointed the flashlight at all corners. Nothing, just earth, humidity, and spiderwebs everywhere. I felt discouragement hit. I had come all this way for nothing. The evidence wasn't here anymore. Someone had found it and taken it. But then I remembered what Mrs. Constance had said. Anna Claire was smart. She wouldn't leave the evidence in an obvious place. She would hide it well hidden. I started examining the walls more carefully. I ran my hand over the damp earth, looking for something different, some hole, some mark. In the back corner, the earth seemed looser. There was a small depression in the wall, as if someone had dug there and then covered it again. My heart raced. I put the flashlight on the floor, pointed at that spot, and started digging with my hands. The earth was soft, damp, came out easily. I dug. My nails became black, my hands dirty up to my wrists. And then I felt something hard, something that wasn't earth. I dug faster, removing the earth around it. It was a can, an old cookie tin, the kind people used to keep things in back then. It was rusty, covered with earth, but still closed. I took it out of the hole in the wall and held it with both hands, trembling. It was heavy. There was something inside. I picked up the flashlight from the floor, sat on the damp earth, and tried to open the can. The lid was stuck from the rust. I forced, until it gave way with a snap. I opened the can and pointed the flashlight inside. Documents. Several rolled-up documents, protected by thick plastic. Papers yellowed by time, but still legible. I took them from the can carefully and started to unroll them. They were invoices, receipts, payment vouchers, all in the name of City Hall and all signed by Colonel Augustus Mitchell. They were overpriced construction material purchases, payments to shell companies, embezzlement of public funds, thousands of dollars, huge amounts for that time. Anna Claire had collected evidence of everything. Each document had her pencil notes in the margins, explaining the irregularity, calculating the amounts embezzled. She had done meticulous work, had discovered a gigantic corruption scheme, and had died for it. I sat there on the floor of that dark and damp basement, holding those old papers, and cried. I cried for Anna Claire, for the life she didn't live, for the wedding that never happened, for the children she never had. I cried for Robert, who carried the guilt of not having saved her, the guilt of having been silent all those years. And I cried for myself, for having lived 15 years without knowing that the man I loved was tormented inside, suffering alone, carrying a weight that wasn't his to carry. I don't know how long I stayed there. It must have been about 15-20 minutes. When I finally pulled myself together, I wiped the tears with the back of my hand dirty with earth. I put the documents back in the can, closed it, and got up. I climbed the stairs back carefully, holding the can under my arm and the flashlight in the other hand. When I got back up in the kitchen, the daylight blinded me for a second. I closed the trap door, crossed the house quickly, and went out the front door. The fresh air outside, even with the heat, seemed to clean my lungs after breathing that rotten air from the basement. I closed the door behind me, crossed the overgrown yard, went out through the gate, and returned to the street. The street was still deserted. Nobody had seen me enter. Nobody saw me leave. I started walking back to the bus stop, pressing the can against my body. Each step I took, I felt the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't just the physical weight of the can, it was the weight of the truth that Anna Claire had discovered, the truth that had cost her life, the truth that had tormented Robert until death. On the bus back home, I sat looking out the window, thinking about what to do. Colonel Augustus Mitchell had been dead since 1973. I couldn't report him anymore, couldn't take him to jail. But the evidence I had in my hand could clear Anna Claire's name, could show the world that she hadn't killed herself, that she had been murdered by a powerful man who wanted to hide his crimes. But would anyone believe me? Would anyone want to reopen this case after 17 years? And more importantly, was it safe to do this? The colonel was dead, but what about the other people involved in the scheme? What if there were more people? What if they came after me? I got home in the early afternoon. I hid the can under the bed. I took a long bath to get all the dirt off and lay down. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally destroyed. I slept for a few hours, a heavy sleep full of nightmares, with abandoned houses, dark basements, and figures hanging from beams. I woke up when it was already getting dark. Saturday night, February 10th, I went to the kitchen, made some coffee, sat at the table, and kept thinking. I needed to talk to someone. I couldn't keep this alone. But with whom? I thought about calling my sister Teresa, but she was too fearful. She'd be terrified. I thought about my father, but he was already old, 72 years old. I didn't want to worry him with these heavy things. And then I remembered Dr. Henry. He had been Robert's family lawyer when they settled his estate. He was a serious, honest, trustworthy man. He was about 55 years old, office downtown. If anyone could help me figure out what to do with this evidence, it was him. On Monday morning, February 12th, I called his office and made an appointment for that afternoon. I got the can from under the bed, put it in a bag, and went to his office. It was 3 p.m. when I arrived. The secretary announced me, and he received me in his office. "Mrs. Mary, what a surprise. How are you? Still recovering from Robert's loss?" "I'm trying, Dr. Henry. But it's precisely about Robert that I came to talk to you. And about something else. Something I discovered after he died." His expression became serious. He offered me a chair and sat behind his desk. I told him everything, from the torn pages to the trip to the abandoned house. I showed him the documents I found in the basement. He read each one carefully, his forehead furrowed, his glasses on the tip of his nose. When he finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me. "Mrs. Mary, this is serious, very serious. This evidence shows a large corruption scheme. If this comes to light, it will tarnish Colonel Augustus Mitchell's memory, and a lot of people won't like that. He still has influential family in town, powerful friends. I know, Doctor, but I can't leave this quiet. Anna Claire deserves justice, Robert deserves peace, and I need to do the right thing." He stared at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I understand and admire your courage, Mrs. Mary. I'll help you. We'll take this to the district attorney. We'll ask for the reopening of Anna Claire Rodriguez's death investigation. With this evidence, and with the testimony you'll give about what Robert wrote on the pages, I think we have a chance. It won't be easy. It will take time, but we'll try." I felt immense relief. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had someone on my side, someone who understood the gravity of what I had discovered and who was willing to help me. We spent the rest of the afternoon organizing the documents, making copies of everything, preparing a detailed report. Dr. Henry said he would file a formal petition the following week. He also said I needed to prepare to have my name exposed, to suffer pressure, to perhaps be questioned, investigated, but that he would be by my side throughout the process. I left his office at night, with a lighter heart but still full of fear of what was to come. I went home, ate a little, and went to bed early. I was tired in a way I had never felt before in my life, a tiredness that came from inside the soul. But along with the tiredness, there was something different, a strange feeling that took me a while to identify what it was. And when I identified it, I was surprised. It was hope. Hope that the truth would come to light. Hope that Anna Claire would have justice. Hope that Robert, wherever he was, would finally have peace. On Wednesday, February 14th, 1979, Dr. Henry filed the formal petition with the district attorney, asking for the reopening of investigations into Anna Claire Rodriguez's death. He called me at the end of the afternoon to let me know he had filed everything. He said now it was a matter of waiting, that these things took time, that the system was slow, but that he hoped the public prosecutor would take the case seriously, considering the evidence we had in hand. The first days after that were quiet, too quiet even. I woke up in the morning kind of expecting something to happen, but nothing happened. Life went on normally. I sewed, cleaned the house, went grocery shopping at the corner market, everything the same. But inside I was different. I felt that something big was starting, like when you smell rain in the air before the storm arrives. The storm arrived the following Monday, February 19th. I woke up early, as always, made my coffee, and went to get the newspaper that the boy left at the door every morning. I opened the newspaper right there on the porch, still in my nightgown, and almost dropped it when I saw the headline on the first page. Widow requests reopening of suspicious 1962 death case and accuses ex-mayor of involvement. My God, it was in the newspaper, on the front page, with my name, with everything. The article told that I, Mary Helen Silva, widow of Robert Silva, had presented evidence to the district attorney that Anna Claire Rodriguez had not committed suicide in 1962, but had been murdered, and that the late Colonel Augustus Mitchell could be involved. The article talked about the documents that were found, about the corruption scheme, about everything. My legs went weak. I went into the house, closed the door, leaned against it, and slid down to sit on the floor. I was shaking. I knew it would become public. Dr. Henry had warned me. But I didn't imagine it would be so fast, and I didn't imagine it would be on the front page of the newspaper. The phone rang. It was my sister Teresa, her voice distressed. "Mary, did you see the newspaper? What is all this? Why didn't you tell me anything?" I tried to calm her down. I said I would explain everything calmly, but that I couldn't talk now. I hung up. The phone rang again. It was a cousin, then a neighbor, then another neighbor, everyone wanting to know, asking, some supporting, others just being curious. I took the phone off the hook and left it off. I couldn't stand talking to anyone anymore. I went to take a shower, get dressed, try to calm down. When I finished, someone knocked on the door. I looked out the window. It was Mr. Armstrong, the neighbor next door. I opened the door, just a crack. "Mrs. Mary, sorry to bother you, but there are some journalists over there on the corner. I think they're waiting for you to leave. Just came to let you know." I thanked him and closed the door. Journalists. Of course the article had come out in the newspaper. Now all the other newspapers wanted the story. They wanted to talk to me, take photos, ask questions. I stayed inside the house all day. I didn't go out even to get bread at the bakery. The next day, Tuesday, things got worse. I woke up to noise in the street. I opened the window curtain and saw about 5 or 6 journalists on the sidewalk in front of the house. When they saw me at the window, they started waving, shouting questions. "Mrs. Mary, can you talk to us? Are you afraid of retaliation? Do you know others involved in the scheme?" I closed the curtain quickly. My heart raced. I couldn't leave the house. I was trapped in my own house. I called Dr. Henry. He came here at the end of the morning. He entered through the back door to avoid the journalists. We sat in the kitchen, and he calmed me down. Mrs. Mary, I know it's difficult, but this will pass. In a few days, the press will get tired and will look for another story. The important thing is that the district attorney is already analyzing the case. The prosecutor called me yesterday, said the evidence is compelling. He's going to open a formal inquiry. It's a big step. But doctor, what if they come after me, the colonel's family, his friends? What if they want to hurt me? That's why I brought this. He took a paper from his briefcase. It's a request for police protection. I'm going to file this today. You'll have an officer patrolling the street, at least until things calm down. And if anything strange happens, any threat, you call me right away. Agreed? I agreed, but the fear didn't go away. He left through the back again, and I stayed there alone, looking at the walls of that house that had been mine and Robert's. I missed him at that moment, missed his support, his hug, his calm voice, saying that everything would be okay. The following days were a mixture of boredom and anxiety. I couldn't leave the house because of the journalists who still insisted on camping on my street. My sister Teresa came to visit me, brought food, stayed a few hours keeping me company. My father also came, worried, asking if I was sure about what I was doing. I said yes, that I needed to do that for Robert, for Anna Claire, for myself. On Saturday, February 24th, I received the first threat. It was a letter without a return address. Someone had placed it under the door during the early morning. When I woke up and saw the white envelope on the floor, I knew it wasn't a good thing. I picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a sheet of paper with a message written in block letters with a black pen. Leave the dead in peace. If you insist, you'll regret it. This is the only warning. I felt my legs weaken. I sat on the sofa, holding that letter, and fear took over me in a way I had never felt. It wasn't just abstract fear anymore, it was real. Someone knew where I lived. Someone had come to my door. Someone was threatening me. I called Dr. Henry immediately. He came here in half an hour, brought a police officer with him. I showed them the letter. The officer, a man about 40 years old, Sergeant Cooper, took the letter carefully, put it in a plastic bag. We'll send it for forensics, see if we can identify anything. But Mrs. Mary, this is serious. These threats need to be taken seriously. You can't stay alone here. Is there anyone who can come live with you for a while? I thought of Teresa. She had a husband, children. She couldn't leave everything to come stay with me. I thought of my parents, but they were too old. I didn't want to put them in danger. In the end, it was decided that Sergeant Cooper would put an officer on duty on my street, 24 hours a day, and that I shouldn't open the door to anyone I didn't know. That Saturday was one of the longest days of my life. I stayed inside the house, looking out the window from time to time, seeing the police car parked on the corner. The journalists had disappeared after the threat was reported. I guess even they got scared. On Sunday, I went to the 10 o'clock Mass at St. Joseph's Church. I needed to get out of that house. I needed to breathe. I needed to pray. I went by car with Teresa, who had come to pick me up. During Mass, I felt people looking at me, some with pity, others with curiosity, others with disapproval. After Mass, on the way out, Mrs. Yvonne, a lady from the community who had always been a friend of the Colonel's family, passed by me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Some people don't know how to respect the memory of the dead." What a shame. That hurt. It hurt more than the threat, more than the journalists, more than everything, because it came from someone in the community, someone who knew me. And I realized that it wasn't just the Colonel's family that was against me, it was part of the entire town. I went home crying. Teresa tried to console me, but there wasn't much to say. The truth was hard. I had stirred up a hornet's nest, and now I was alone in the middle of it, getting stung from all sides. On Monday, February 26th, Dr. Henry called me with good news and bad news. The good news, the district attorney had officially reopened the investigations. They were going to exhume Anna Claire's body for a new autopsy. They were going to interrogate people who were involved at the time. The case was being taken seriously. The bad news: Colonel Augustus Mitchell's family had hired a lawyer and was preparing a lawsuit against me for defamation and slander. They wanted to sue me. They wanted me to pay a heavy compensation. They wanted to destroy me financially and morally. But, doctor, I have the evidence, the documents. How can they sue me if I have evidence? They'll claim the documents could be fake, that there's no concrete evidence that the colonel was directly involved with Anna Claire's death, only with the corruption. And even the corruption, they'll try to discredit. They'll say you forged everything. It's an intimidation strategy, Mrs. Mary. They want to scare you into giving up. I won't give up. I know. And I'll defend you. We'll prove everything is true. But I need you to be strong. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And he was right. It got much worse. On Tuesday, a story appeared in the newspaper written by a famous columnist in town, a friend of the Mitchell family. The article was a direct attack on me. It said I was a resentful widow, trying to destroy the reputation of an honorable man who could no longer defend himself. It said I probably made everything up to get attention, to get money, I don't know. He used harsh words, called me an opportunist, a liar, a defamer. I read that story and felt a rage I had never felt in my life. Rage and helplessness. How could that man write that without even knowing me? Without even having seen the evidence? Just because he was a friend of the colonel's family. But the worst was yet to come. On Wednesday, February 28th, when I went to the market to shop for the first time in days, I felt on my skin what it was like to be rejected. The market owner, Mr. Ain Jackson, who had always been friendly with me, barely greeted me. The other customers moved away when I passed through the aisles. I heard whispers, giggles. In the checkout line, a woman in front of me turned around and said, "You should be ashamed, defaming a dead man who did so much for this city." I didn't respond. I paid for my purchases and left there as fast as I could, holding back tears until I got home. When I closed the door, I broke down. I cried.